million. And in fact, we expect that will rise as more ballots are returned to us. That means that we're going to have what I believe will be a record turnout, not record by a great amount, but a record. We were almost 3.7 million participants in 2020. I think we will exceed that tomorrow. I say that because, as I've indicated already, we have 1.7 almost having already been returned. We expect more votes and ballots to come back from the mail-out ballots over the next 48 hours. And in fact, to that end, I want to mention that we are strongly recommending that at this point, voters who still have vote-by-mail ballots do not mail them. If at all possible, return them to a drop box or take them into your city or town election offices. You cannot drop them off at a polling place. The drop boxes are your best option. If you must mail it for whatever reason, it's very important that it be postmarked prior to the end of the day tomorrow. If it is postmarked by November 5th, it will be counted, assuming it's received by the local election officers by November the 8th. I think it's also important to point out to voters that at this point, registration is closed, so only registered voters will be able to participate in the election tomorrow. I want to mention a few other things related to tomorrow's election. The polls will be open from 7 a.m. to 8 p.m. statewide, uniformly. People who are still waiting in line at 8 o'clock tomorrow evening will be allowed to vote. There'll be an official queue or line set up, and that will afford people the opportunity to vote. We strongly recommend to voters, first of all, that before they go to the polls, verify by looking at our website their registration status to make sure they are registered, especially if they have moved over the last several years and have not voted over the last several years. We would suggest they use our website also to determine precisely where their polling locations are. Polling locations change from year to year, so if they use our Where to Vote feature of our website, they too will be benefited by that. In terms of voting itself, one of the things that is extremely important is that voters understand that in order to vote, they need to mark all of the ovals or whatever the markings are. Because of the requirements we have to print ballots, not just with 5 questions, but to do it in multiple languages, there are questions will be on the back side of several of the ballots. To that extent, we're reminding voters before they leave the polling location to make sure, and before they try to turn the ballot in, to make sure to flip the ballot over to make sure they voted on both sides on all of the questions and not miss any questions. We think that we are prepared for this election. We think that we have seen a remarkable turnout in terms of the level of participation. We think people have appreciated the options that they've been presented with. Nevertheless, it's my opinion that we will see more people actually turn out tomorrow than have participated so far. To that extent, I do believe we will exceed our record turnout of 2020 of 3.6 million, almost 3.7 million. We have now a significant number of new voters because of the registration changes that we've made. So many voters find themselves on the rolls, having interacted with the Registry of Motor Vehicles or other state agencies. For all those reasons and the intensity of this election, I do think we will have a record turnout, as I've already mentioned. Lastly, I want to mention, as the now senior election administrator in the United States, amongst all the states, I think what we've seen over the last several weeks in the remarkable turnout of almost 80 million citizens under intense scrutiny with continued review of activities, what we've seen is a commitment on the part of not just voters to participate, but also about the integrity of those who run elections in our country. I may not agree with the policies or procedures of other states. I may not certainly agree with their choice of candidates, but I think I can tell you that the people who administer elections in the United States are people of integrity. They're honest people, and the tallies they present are honest tallies. And I think it's very important as our country approaches this pivotal election in light of all that's happened over the last several years to reaffirm the basic honesty and integrity of those who conduct elections in our country. And I think that we can be counting on that. I think as we approach this very sensitive and intense election, I think we can also be aware of the fact of the commitment of those people to the honesty of the process and to democracy itself. With that having been said, I'll be happy to answer any questions you might have.
Secretary, you mentioned that people should check their voting status. What happens if they have some sort of issue? Should they be bringing a license or?
Well, yes. Let me elaborate a little bit. If somebody is, for some reason, could be an inactive voter, they haven't participated for several years, they're still being carried on the rolls, but they haven't gone to vote and they're declared inactive. If they are an inactive voter, in order to vote tomorrow at the polls, they'll have to have some show of identification or commitment to that particular address. They'll have to execute an affidavit at the time as well in order to participate in the election tomorrow. This is not unusual. We know, especially in a presidential election, people who come out to vote who have not voted regularly over the last several years. Also, as I said, if people move within a city, they may want to see where they're being carried. Are they being carried to their new address? So those are the types of things I'm suggesting. Presumably they've done that. We've had this site up for some time, and we do think that gives people the opportunity to make sure they're prepared to come to the polls. Yes?
I was just wondering, you said execute an affidavit. Can we do that? Can voters do that at the polls?
They have to. It's done at the polls. In other words, the election workers there will give them the affidavit if necessary. But that only applies to inactive voters. It does not apply to every other voter. Yes? I can get a number for you. Inactive vote, like most states, or like all states really, we're required to maintain our voter list to make sure that we give people the opportunity to be carried over on the list. So oftentimes there's a lag period between the time that a voter might leave an address and relocate to another address, whether it's in the state or out of the state, and re-register. So there'll probably be well over 1 million inactive voters. Most of these individuals will vote somewhere else or won't vote here or don't live here, won't be attempting to vote. Under federal law, we're required to make sure they're not purged from the list in case they have remained. So what we want to make sure is that those persons are not surprised by the fact they may have to execute an affidavit in order to participate. It happens all the time. It's not a big problem, and it's certainly not going to delay the process. No, yes. Well, in Massachusetts, by law, a police officer is present in every polling place. And that's very important. I think one of the things that I should mention also is that in terms of Massachusetts voting, there's a 150-foot law that says political activity has to cease within 150 feet of a polling location. That includes attire. So individuals can't wear not just political paraphernalia, but even attire that clearly has a political slogan or something else. But in terms of security, I think the police officer should be a reassurance not just to the voters, but to election workers, everyone who's participating, because it means that there is a network already in place to make sure if any issue arises, it can be dealt with. No, we haven't. We're not aware of any particular threats, as the phrase goes. It's not about that. I think we're concerned about the general atmosphere, but we do think, given what we've seen at the locations we've had, don't forget we've had early in-person locations going now for a couple of weeks that we did have up to last Friday, where many voters were coming out. I was at several of them myself. There were no activities there that were of concern. I think we make it clear to everybody that you can't wear paraphernalia, hats, or shirts, and it applies across the board, irrespective of your party. So that having been said, we don't see any particular security issue. Sorry? Well, it's the presidential election. The presidential election clearly is the premier event. We do have the ballot questions, and as you know, we distributed the booklet to everybody. There are 5 questions. They touch, as you know, on a range of topics. We strongly advise people to either read the booklet. There will be booklets available at the polls. Read carefully the questions before they answer them. You had a question?
Similar to this question, the other disinformation, any reports of your office on a small level about any bad actors, I guess?
No, I mean, we've had no issues, specific issues to us. I mean, our experience here in Massachusetts has generally been, while we've had some behavioral issues with some people coming into election offices, not recently, but over the last 4 years, looking for records that don't exist. We've had issues, but we've had no physical threats, which we're very grateful for. We're not aware of any particular matter. As I said, the run-through we've already had with the early voting in person sessions gives everyone a sense of the atmosphere, and I think it's been very positive. Yes? Right. Well, that's not new. We have a number of cities in our Commonwealth and towns that are under the Voting Rights Act because of the populations that live there in terms of language issues. The Justice Department in every election works closely with us. We held a preliminary meeting. The election director meets with, our election director meets with them, as well as other groups who are interested in observing the election. And with that in mind, we anticipate they're going to provide review, as they do, pretty much on enforcement of their issues, which primarily relate to language. And the communities that have been selected by them all have language issues. No. Well, I mean, we've had the usual issues on mail-in ballots, which are people are concerned about when they get them, how to return them. We know right now, one of the reasons I'm speculating we're going to have a turnout exceeding our record of 2020 is we have almost 300,000 vote-by-mail ballots that are still outstanding that we mailed out. Now, we know some of those people chose to go to an early voting session and already voted in person. We already know that. We suspect more will choose to vote in person tomorrow, but we still think there's a significant number that will be returned as early ballots by mail, which is why I brought up the drop box issue and the return issue. So with that in mind, you know, we've had no real issues. We want to make sure we did by mailing them out early, that people got them if there was any issue, or if there was a misplaced ballot of some kind, it could be replaced, and that's what's happened. Go ahead. Certified? Well, they can't be certified till the books and the elections are closed. So I already mentioned to you there's 3 days that the ballots cast in Massachusetts, if they're sent back by mail and postmark, have to be included. There's 10 days for overseas balloters, which are primarily military people. So the final results could not even be certified until that time. What there will be is unofficial results, of course, and we'll be hearing those and seeing those, but the certified results won't occur till after that. Then in Massachusetts, the final results are certified by the governor and council. Usually that occurs in early December. The Electoral College meets on December 17th, and obviously everything has to be completed before that.
Sorry to harp on that deadline on the mailing ballot, but you're saying don't mail, just to clarify, don't mail your ballot now, just to make sure it gets there. Technically, it can still be voted.
It can be, it could be. I held that out as a last resort, though. The Postal Service itself said to us they couldn't deliver, they couldn't be assured of delivery or assured delivery within beyond 7 days. That's last Tuesday. So we've been saying for some time, if you're getting into that area, you don't want to put it in the mail because they may not get it in time. You can still mail it. If it has to be postmarked by the 5th in order to be counted. So if you're going to mail it, if you felt you had to mail it, what I would suggest is you go into a post office and have them hand cancel it, showing that you brought it to the post office today or tomorrow, and then hope it gets delivered by the 3 days or by Friday, which is the 8th. That's why the mail is the perilous way. The drop boxes are better at this point, or take it, bring it into the election office. You can't bring it to the polls. You simply can't go to your polling place and drop it off. You can't do that.
If you got a mail-in ballot and you didn't fill it out or send it, you can go vote on it.
Yes, and you don't have to bring the ballot with you as long as you've not returned it. If I should mention, if you have cast a mail-in ballot, or you voted in person, and now you suddenly decide you want to change your mind on one of the ballot questions. Too late. You voted, you're gone. That's it. So. If you're in line at 8 o'clock, and that has happened here in presidential elections, we will set up what is known as a queue, an official line, and a police officer will be placed at the end of the line at 8 o'clock, so no one else can get in the line. But you will be allowed to vote even if it takes till 9 o'clock or 10 o'clock, whatever it's going to take, you'll be allowed to vote. There was a line and it was a queue. Well, it was over at 5. The line was closed at 5, but everybody who was in the line was allowed to vote. What it tells us is the level of interest. That's why I'm looking at the numbers from the last few presidential elections, and we've been exceeding our number every single time. The question was, will we do it this time? And I think we will. And I'm basing that on the fact that we have, as I said, 1.7 roughly already cast. We think that's going to go up. I do believe at least 50%, again, based upon past experiences, that at least 50% of the total turnout will come tomorrow. So if that's the case, then you go over 3.6, we're over where we were. That's what I think. But I think what you're speaking to is the level of interest, and I think the level of interest is there. I think it's further enhanced by the fact that we continue to see polling, which if nobody else in this country agrees, apparently all the pollsters do, it's close. So if that's the case, then that only intensifies the impact of each and every vote.
Mr. Secretary, both sides have said that this is the most important election in
Yeah.
anybody's lifetimes. You referenced yourself as the most experienced election official in the country. If you were to cast back on your lifetime, does that sound like an accurate assessment?
I think they're all important because think of all the things that happened over the 4 years. I mean, 4 years ago, when we had, again, a very intense election, all the activities that occur, every presidential term is different, and the challenges the country and the world faces are different. So it's always important. I think what the current description speaks to is the differences between the two nominees, their outlooks. Without getting into the partisan issues, I think that's one thing they probably would agree on. They're very distinct. They have totally different approaches. There's a lot to choose between, and people have that sense. So it is important. Clearly, I think, as I said, and the reason I specifically brought up the activities of elections and election administrators is that I think for many people, this is a very important election in terms of the process, that are we going to be able to rely on the process? I say we are, but I think for many voters, they're very concerned about that, and I think they should be.
Any of your colleagues in other states that have a lot more eyeballs, have they reached out to you given that
I have spoken with some of them. We were in regular contact with many of them, especially in New England, but beyond New England, I've spoken with a number of them over the last several months. We've all been talking about this for a long time. Earlier on, a month or so ago, our National Association, which is bipartisan, had a phone call jointly with the Postmaster General to express our concerns about the activities of the post office. So we've had a lot of communication between the states. The laws vary. Obviously, I happen to think, and I'm very proud of the fact, that we offer all these options to voters. I think we have the best system in the country, and many other states see that. For a lot of reasons, they couldn't do that. The state legislature wouldn't approve it, the courts wouldn't approve it, the atmosphere wasn't right. But I think despite that, we all have the same fundamentals, which is citizens with the right to vote should get their ballots counted if they vote, and making sure they can vote. And I think that's the commitment we have to honesty and accuracy. Well, we're not, when you say political violence, our focus is on the polls. And as I've already mentioned, we have a police officer by law at every polling location. We've had training sessions with our election officials, our local election officials over the last couple of months. We've discussed with them the types of situations they might confront. I'm not going to go into the details, but we are prepared. We have been prepared. And I think, as I've already mentioned, we've already had an excellent dress rehearsal with the early voting sessions. I was out to Needham on the kickoff day. and we had hundreds of people coming into town hall, variety of people, different opinions, and they were all participating, handled very well. I think this gave everyone a sense of the reality of voting, and we're pleased with what we saw in that process, and I'm hoping it bodes well for tomorrow. Well, where there are contests, which aren't many. I think the legislative races, again, where there are contests, I think primarily the open seats. In the Senate, there's an open seat on the South Shore. There's a couple of open seats, and there are a couple of challenges. In the House, it's mostly the open seats. There aren't too many challenged races. There are a couple, but not many. Well, they're not volunteers. Municipalities pay people to work the polls, so we think we're fully staffed. Obviously, that was a concern. We did have a large number of clerks change over the last 4 years. We had a lot of new clerks. This is the first election they've run, a presidential election they've run. So, you know, we work closely to train them, but we've told them repeatedly to make sure they have all of their workers prepared, trained. My office has run training sessions for workers throughout the state. We also, I should mention, they know it, but I'll reiterate it, we do have facilities at every polling location for persons with disabilities who are allowing them to vote without assistance, which is extremely important to them. We've trained those people, and we have equipment in every polling location to do that. So we've done the training, and we're satisfied with it. As I said, the early voting experience and the early voting sessions have given us an excellent opportunity to run through the process once again. Yes? Well, we've discussed drop boxes for some time now, yes. The drop boxes are primarily located very proximate to town offices, oftentimes police stations. For the most part, there are only 1 or 2 drop boxes in most communities, which are going to be emptied throughout the day. We had concerns over the longer period of time last week with Halloween. Some of the communities took extra precautions, but so far it's been well done. I think as we get down the stretch here through today and tomorrow, they'll be protected. Everyone knows they're there, and that's why we're suggesting to people if they have a ballot, they need to get back. Right now, the drop box is the best approach. It's going to come in, or bring it right into City or Town Hall if you don't comfortable with the drop box. Any other questions? Well, again, the polls are open from 7 a.m. to 8 p.m. We hope anybody who has not yet participated takes the opportunity to participate. Reminding everybody again, both sides, make sure you get all the questions. Some communities have more than 5 questions. They may have local questions. So it's important to get everything that you need to do done before you turn your ballot back in. And that's the other thing here in Massachusetts. You know, we only have paper ballots. The voters themselves take the ballot and put it right in, deposit it right into the box. And I think that builds confidence. And the box will be tabulated and combined with all the other ballots that have been previously put together to be tabulated. Again, thank you very much. Vote early, but not often.